Everybody ain't who you think they are. Everybody got an agenda, and it's high-key sad.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. Today we're looking back at the Utah Jazz season in review. Today's show is also brought to you in part by Hotels.com, by Grip 6 Belts, and by UnTuckit. Michael Bolton, he wants to hear about Utah.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. The Jazz finished last season with a 50-32 record, good for the 5th seed in the Western Conference, and they lost in the first round of the playoffs to the Rockets, a 4-1 loss there to the Rockets. They were pretty comprehensively defeated by Houston for the second consecutive season. This is a team that's strength is built on its defense, the second best defense in the NBA according to Basketball Reference. 13th in pace, which is a bit of a departure from what Utah has done in the past, and 15th in offense. So a decently strong offense back with that really strong defense pushed them to that record they have, but overall a disappointing end to the season for this Utah Jazz squad. They move the ball pretty well, 8th in the NBA in assists, 9th in total rebounds, 10th in three-point percentage, 9th in three-point attempts, 6th in two-point percentage, so a strong shooting team. They block a lot of shots. Defensively, they limit assists from other teams, they limit rebounds from other teams. They were helped a little bit by the fact that opposition teams had the worst free throw percentage against them, so only 75% their opponent shot, which is not something they really control. But in terms of allowing three-pointers, they allowed the fewest three-point attempts in the entire NBA. That's obviously a great way to go about getting that good defense. They get to the line a lot. They take a lot of threes. Overall, the ability of this team is there. They just can't seem to get over that hump. They had injuries, a marginal excuse, but not really massively. Dante Exum, ravishing Ricky Rubio had some time on the sidelines. They just are a little bit limited in what they overall do. Donovan Mitchell didn't take quite the leap that we would have hoped that he could take this season. And in the end, they ended up petering out and losing in that first round after looking like they could have been a threat for that top 4 in the Western Conference, getting home court advantage, and maybe pushing through to the second round, and maybe all the way through to the conference finals, depending on how things broke for them. In terms of their off-season outlook, they have pick number 23 and pick number 53. Both of those are their selections. Cap space, well, they don't really have huge amounts at this point, but they could get up to $38.5 million of cap space. They'll be looking to add someone to this squad to try and make a difference. Of course, to get to that level of cap space, there's a lot of guys they have to get rid of. One of those would be ravishing Ricky Rubio, an unrestricted free agent. There's Thabo Sefolosha and Ekpe Udoh, who are both unrestricted free agents. They would have no problem in getting rid of those guys. And there's a bunch of non-guaranteed guys, which is led by Derek Favors, who is $16.9 million contract, but it is non-guaranteed. Now, Favors, I think they'll look to bring him back. Favors would want to come back, but if they're looking to create that extra cap space, that is where they can do it. They can also do it with Kyle Korver, who's got a $7.5 million contract for this upcoming season, but half of that is guaranteed. So $3.5 million of that, or a bit under half of that, is guaranteed. $3.5 million there is guaranteed, so they can get an extra $4 million of cap space by waiving Korver. There's Raul Neto, George Niang, and Royce O'Neal. All have non-guaranteed salaries as well. 2.1 for Raul Neto, 1.6 for both Niang and O'Neal. You'd think O'Neal and Niang would be back, even Neto at those numbers. But if they are looking for that extra cap space, getting rid of Korver and Favors could open up a lot of space. But these were relatively key rotation pieces, especially Favors, who started the majority of the season for this Utah Jazz squad. And then, of course, if Rubio leaves, which is another part of that, getting that cap space, they need to find a replacement point guard. That, of course, lots of whispers about Mike Conley coming to Utah in a trade. Maybe they could be looking to do something like that. Maybe Derek Favors' non-guaranteed deal goes back in a Conley trade and they renounce Rubio's rights. They send other players out to Memphis as well. So there are possibilities, of course, bringing in Memphis and Conley's $30+ million, I think it's $33 million on the books for this season would eat into that cap space. But they are looking to make some sort of a splash, whether that is through a Conley trade or whether that is through free agency. Not that there are many high-profile free agent point guards who'd be looking to come across there, but you'd have to feel that the Rubio experiment in Utah feels like it's done. He was solid at times. Injuries have hurt him. Poor play has hurt him. Quinn Snyder hasn't been 100% committed to him at times as well. So there is going to be some off-season upheaval with this team. I think there's pretty much no doubt about that there will be some changes with this Utah Jazz squad for this upcoming season. And if you want to make sure you don't have any upheaval in your life, make sure you are subscribed to this podcast, and do that by downloading the Himalaya podcast app, a great app for podcasts. Curate your own lists tailored to your personal listening interests. Just download that Himalaya podcast app, subscribe to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast and your favorite podcast right across the Locked On Podcast network. We're also brought to you today in part by Hotels.com and Grip 6 Belts. Go to Grip 6, that's Grip 6, the number 6.com/LOCKE to get you the best deal on belts. Men's belts, women's belts, kids' belts. Fantastic. I love my Grip 6 belts. No holes, no flaps, nothing. Just a very flat, smooth, streamlined belt that looks absolutely awesome. So go check it out. Grip6.com/LOCKE. Let's look at this squad now. The number one fantasy player on this team was Rudy Gobert. 81 games, 32 minutes a night, 16 and 13. And we can talk as much as we want about Gobert's playoff issues and getting played off the court. Houston's a bad matchup for him. That's all well and good, but it doesn't really impact us much for fantasy. He is still excellent at what he does. A great rebounder, a great shot blocker, a great field goal percentage guy. 16 and 13, 2.3 blocks, 67%. The free throws are always going to be an issue, and he takes so many of them. He's in that punt territory. He's another one of these guys that players say, he's going to improve. I know Gobert's a good free throw shooter. It's going to get better, and it just never has, really. He's gone 49 in his first season, 62, 57, 65, 68, 64. So, 68 is an improvement over 65, no doubt about that. But when you're taking 6 attempts per game, this was actually his worst free throw percentage impact season, despite being a better shooting season than the 59 season, the 62 season, the 60 season. This was the worst free throw impact season because his free throw rate got so high. So you've got to be willing to punt that category. He's a much better head-to-head guy than roto guy because he's got these big spikes, the bright greens, the bright reds, big rebounding, big blocks, big field goal percentage. Doesn't hit threes, low assists, terrible free throw percentage. Very, very specific to what team you're looking at. 22nd overall ranked player. As I mentioned, we know just how impactful he is as a player. Plus 5.02 PIPM, massive defensive PIPM, favorite for defensive player of the year, all defense first team, all NBA third team, added over 12 wins to this Utah Jazz team. Plus 5.9, which was third on this team, second including the major rotation players. He just is a key piece. He's underrated offensively. He still provides great value offensively because of his ability to catch lobs, roll to the rim, finish at a high efficiency. Yes, he can't take jumpers. We're well aware of that. This is not Rudy Gobert's game, but he doesn't do it, and that's something like, say, Andre Drummond. He can't take jumpers, but he still does, and that's why he has such poor efficiency, tries these ridiculous post-ups. But Gobert, you can be an impactful guy. 72% finishing at the rim. Can't take corner threes, can't take long twos. Does it at such limited amounts that it doesn't, when he does have to take those shots and it doesn't go in, it's not as big of an impact. If he could do it, it would be awesome, but he sticks to what he's good at, and it fits in perfectly with this squad. Donovan Mitchell, a bit of a disappointing season, much like when we talked about Boston yesterday, that Donovan Mitchell, we expected a little bit of a step forward, and we got, I guess, a bit of a step forward from Mitchell this season, but it wasn't massive. He was the 49th ranked player in his rookie year, 46th this season. And that is an improvement, but it's not much. 23.8 points, 2.5 threes, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.2 steals, 43 and 81%, including 36% from 3. So why did we see these struggles from Mitchell? Well, the 3-point percentage really went back and forward all season. He didn't take that big step forward. And while he did improve his free throw rate, he didn't improve it enough. He went from 3.8 attempts per game as a rookie to 5.2. So that's an improvement. But he needs to be a 7.5, 8 free throw attempts per game guy, and that's where he jumps into the top 20 consideration. But the thing is with Donovan Mitchell is we saw that when he started as the point guard on this team, he would get 8, 9, 10, 12 free throw attempts. When he moved off the ball and played alongside Ricky Rubio, he'd get 3 attempts and 4 attempts and 0 attempts, and that would really nullify one of his best overall skills. The steal rate from Mitchell also dropped this season. But the other thing we need to pay attention to, and while this is all fine, he upped his usage rate this season, his efficiency actually decreased because the shots weren't going in, especially his two-pointers. They were well off. 4 percentage point drops in his two-pointers. But the framework of a top 20 guy is still there. Almost a 24-point per game guy in his second season. You think he maybe can top out as a 26, 27-point per game guy. But if he gets to run more offense as the point guard, which the problem with that is when he was the point guard, the Jazz offense was significantly worse versus when Ricky Rubio was and he was playing, or even Hal Neto versus when Mitchell was playing off the ball. It's great for Mitchell's individual stats, but for team success, it's not as important. So that's the trade-off. We hope, from a fantasy point of view, if you have Mitchell in dynasty leagues, if you're drafting him, man, just play him as a point guard because the numbers will be sky high. You'll get 27 and 7 with 84% on 7 attempts, which is excellent, but it is detrimental to the Jazz's success. So if they struggle with point guards, if they get injury-prone point guards and he has to play that role, that's great, but that is not something that it appears like. And from what I know, speaking with David Locke, is that the Jazz are well aware of that Rubio is, or no, that Mitchell, the team doesn't function as well when Mitchell runs as the point guard, and that's something we have to bear in mind. It has to leave me reassessing my overall expectations for Mitchell, because for him to get to that top 20 guy, he needs to get that amount of free throws and turn that free throw Z score from 0.3 to 1.5. He needs to be getting that level. We need to see him at 5.5 to 6 assists with 1.7 steals, and to do that, I believe he needs to be a point guard. He also needs to shoot better because he did struggle this season after being excellent as a rookie. There were massive struggles with some of his shooting this season. His three-pointers were okay, but not excellent. His mid-range twos were okay, but not excellent. His finishing at the rim was okay, but not excellent. He was still really good, but a bit of a letdown overall. Third on this team in PIPM, plus 2.14. Third in wins added, not a surprise there. Plus 5 on-off. Everything there is strong, and he sets himself up to take another step forward to be a top 40, maybe top 30 player next season. But it is going to come down to so much on what happens with his assist rate. And I think that when Joe Ingles sees his role drop off in 3 years' time or moves on to a different team, that Ingles is 6 assists per game. A lot of that will go towards Donovan Mitchell, and that will push him. I still believe he's a top 20 player overall coming up in the future. Do I think he can get to top 10? Maybe he can have one season as a top 10 player, but maybe more realistic to think of him as a top 15 guy as we move forward as his overall peak. But that efficiency needs to jump. We need 46 to 47% field goals. We need 7 to 8 free throws. We need 1.7 steals and 5.5 assists, and then that's where he gets there. These aren't crazy numbers to expect from Mitchell, but it is what he needs to do to get to that level. Speaking of Jingle Joe Ingles, the 75th ranked overall player in fantasy, going to turn 32 at some point during the next season. All 82 games again, 31 minutes, 12, 4, and 5.7 assists, 1.2 steals, over 2 threes, 45 and a weird 71% from the line, but still hit 39% of his free throws. He was at 80% from the line last season, so almost a 9 percentage point drop overall is pretty disappointing. That dropped his true shooting, which had been over 60% each of the last 2 seasons, down to 57%. And caused him to take somewhat of a step back this season. He was the 63rd ranked player this season and fell a little bit behind that, almost exclusively because of the free throw percentage drop. He still generates steals, his assists were at a career high level, he rebounds well, his scoring is there, and you'd think that the Ingles at 31 can do this for another 1 year, 2 years probably at this sort of a level, so maybe another 2 top 100 seasons left for Ingles. The problem you do have there is just that free throws. We need that to push back up. And then when he does drop off, that assist rate is really carrying him as his number 1 overall fantasy contribution, assuming you're not playing, or even if you are playing 3-point percentage leagues, getting 6 attempts per game like peak Nick Batum type numbers. That's so important. He had an ADP weirdly of 59 and didn't live up to that number. But still, overall, I think it was a relatively solid season from Ingles, and we can expect him to do similar stuff again. He was second on this team in PIPM. Defensively, offensively, he's strong on both ends there. Plus 6 on-off, led the team in on-off. He's still just a really important player for this squad and fills that role that was vacated by Gordon Hayward and fills it to aplomb. The next guy we look at is, of course, ravishing Rick Rubio. Only 28 minutes a night for Rubio, 68 games, 12.7 points, 3.5 boards with 6 assists, 1.4 steals, 40 and 86, including 31% from 3. But as I mentioned earlier, It's going to be really interesting to see whether they move on from him, because this is a guy who in Minnesota averaged 8.6, 8.8, 8.7, 9.1 his last 4 seasons there. In Utah, that's assists. In Utah, 5.3 and 6.3. The ball sharing with Mitchell, with Ingles, with Rubio, it impacted him. If he goes to another team where he can get into that role and be a starting point guard and play 30 minutes a night, well then 8 assists come back and he goes back to knocking on the door of being at least a top 50 player, maybe top 60 player. We saw him generate his 1.5 steals. The shooting still, it's never going to be good, but it's not it's not great. It's not atrocious though. He's had a true shooting of over 52% for 4 consecutive seasons. And while that's not great, compared to other guys who have, sub 50%, Terry Rozier type numbers, it is solid enough. Usage of 23%, one of the highest or second highest number of his career there. Scoring was the second highest number of his career this season as well. And we saw that he was important to this squad. I'm just not sure they're going to be prioritizing bringing him back. Solid enough as a defensive guy. Offensively, he gets the ball moving. And as I said, playing him as the point guard, the Jazz offense is much better than when Mitchell's doing it. A plus 1.22 PIPM is a strong number from Rubio. A plus 3.2 on-off. He's always been great in that metric in helping teams win. But his future's really up in the air. Whether Utah brings him back and what other team wants to bring him across. Maybe he ends up in Memphis as a 1-year stopgap to get Ja Morant better or get ready for that role. I don't know. He's going to be one of those very interesting free agency guys, because no matter wherever he goes, if he finds a 30-minute role, I think those assists, it almost couldn't be a worse situation unless he was playing alongside LeBron James for those assist numbers in Utah, and he goes to another team, they'll jump up. And whatever point guard does come to Utah in place of Rubio, we have to be aware of this Quinn Snyder offense, the Ingles and Mitchell effect, as to how that will impact their overall assist numbers, because we've seen it here for 2 consecutive seasons for one of the best assist men in the league to drop his assist numbers by 2-3 per game is a real artifact that we need to pay attention to when looking at whoever comes in and fills that role. The 5th top 100 player that this Jazz team had this season was Derek Favors.
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
I didn't think that he could get anywhere near this number. The ADP would suggest that. 136th overall, finished 90th, surprising, only 23 minutes a game. He really upped his per minute production, 12 and 7.5, 1.4 blocks, 0.7 steals, 59% from the field, a weirdly poor 68% from the line as well for Favors. But he was able to improve so much. His rebound rate, which for each of the past 4 seasons had been under 10 per 36, skyrocketed to 11.5. His block rate for each of the 5 last seasons had been 1.9 per 36 or lower, went to 2.2 per 36, so upped his block rate. Had a career high true shooting. He'd never been over 60%, and he got to 63% this season. His everything else about him stayed basically the same, but his usage was still pretty low. But that efficiency jump, that jump from 59 to 63%, 4 percentage points in true shooting, is huge. The block rate increase is huge. The rebound rate increase is huge. And that is why he was able to be a top 100 guy. I was looking at what he'd done basically his entire career with the same team, with the same players around him. I thought, well, he is likely to play fewer minutes this season as we get more stretch 4 from Jay Crowder. And that is what happened. Just what happened is his per minute production went absolutely bananas for numbers that we'd never seen from him before, and they pushed up really, really high. Now, he still hasn't turned 28 years of age. Favors has a lot of basketball left ahead of him. If he is cut to bring in a max contract guy, goes to another team and plays anywhere of 25 or 26 minutes and above, he is a comfortable top 100 guy. But finding this level of production in 23 minutes a night again might be tough, because if any of those career high marks, field goal percentage, blocks and rebounds fall away, then that number falls out and he's out of the top 100 real quick. But he's got a ton of basketball left in him, and he will find himself in a different situation. If he finds himself in a different situation, then he does become that top 100 guy again. Really, really good defensively, a plus 0.1 PIPM. Weirdly, a negative 2.1 on-off, which is a bit concerning considering how much he played with Gobert and Mitchell and Rubio and those starters and Ingles, but he did play some backup roles at times. The backup center on this team was his position. That's really what his best position is in the NBA now, which might be able to help him at least keep that block rate, rebound rate, and field goal percentage as high as it was. So there might be some evidence there to suggest that he can keep that level at the level that it was this season, despite this being a real career high for him. Don't forget to check out hotels.com and check out UnTuckit as well. A couple of our sponsors, hotels.com, a great way for you to go and book your trip. Don't hate like your friend's trip. Book with your own with hotels.com and get rewarded basically everywhere. And UnTuckit, a great way to get that shirt that looked great untucked. Not one of these crazy shirts that just looks terrible and sloppy when you've got it untucked. UnTuckit is designed to look great when it's untucked. A great gift for Father's Day coming up for you guys in the States. Our Father's Day is not until September, but you guys in the States, UnTuckit is where you should be looking to grab that great look untucked shirt for your dad, uncle, brother, nephew, whatever it is, birthdays, whatever gifts coming up. Hey, just spoil yourself as well. I forgot to tell you, use the promo code NBA to get 20% off at UnTuckit. All right, let's go on to the next guy. It is Jay Crowder. We have fall away. They had five top 100 guys, and then Jay Crowder 173rd. Now, he played a lot of minutes, 27 minutes, but just doesn't provide huge amounts. That one season where he had as a good shooter in Boston seems so far away. The 16-17 season, he was a 40% shooter. The season before that, he was a 1.7 steals guy, and that gave him the impression of being a consistent top 70 fantasy guy because he was 52nd in one of those years, 67th in the other. And then after that, the shooting is gone, the steals have gone, and he's not good. 33% from the three-point line again this season, 32 last year, 0.8 steals for 2 consecutive seasons. He hits threes, doesn't do it all that efficiently, but he hits them. Rebound has dropped right off for him. He never gets assists, he doesn't get blocks. He's not a high-volume scorer. Those two things which really propped him up, the three-point shooting and the steal rate in those 2 seasons in Boston, have disappeared. And that has really rendered Jay Crowder as an afterthought in 12 and 14 and 16 team. Well, he's probably a 16-team league guy, despite playing a significantly more minutes and favors. 4 extra minutes and favors, 80 fantasy rank spots difference between those two guys. Crowder was really poor defensively from a PIPM metric, negative 1.14, 0.45 overall, negative 0.445 overall PIPM, and absolute neutral in terms of on-off. Defensively, the team struggled when he was on the court, which for a guy that banks or markets himself and his reputation is built on being a great defender, he has struggled in that area the last couple of seasons. Really, he's just more of a stretch 4 guy who can at least provide passable level aggressive defense, which does struggle in the on-court stuff. So I'm not massively high on Crowder as a player. He's a clear rotation guy, but as a fantasy player, not someone you really want to be paying too much attention to as you look at those standard leagues. I thought Royce O'Neal was pretty solid this season. He is 26 years of age after finishing his second year, played all 82 games, 20 minutes a night, 5 and 3.5 with 0.7 steals, 48 and 76, and shot 39% from 3 on 2 attempts per game. He was the guy that would move into the starting lineup when Rubio would get hurt and play shooting guard alongside Mitchell. His offense is always going to be the problem for O'Neal. He's a really strong defender at a negative 0.4 on off, so about neutral there, but he's never going to be a strong fantasy guy, but he had his moments, no doubt. There were a couple of solid games. He had 17 points in a 40-minute performance against the Thunder with 8 boards and 5 triples. He had a string of 4 consecutive double-digit scoring games back at the start of February around the All-Star break or before the All-Star break where he's scoring, hitting threes, getting steals. He had a moment there, a stretch in January where he was starting and had 4 double-digit scoring games in 6 of the games he started, multiple steals, a couple of double-digit rebound games. So he's shown flashes at times. I don't think he's good enough to command a starting level job somewhere. As I mentioned earlier, he has that non-guarantee on his deal, then becomes a restricted free agent, and you'd think they'd pick him up just because he is a very handy rotation piece who can defend really strongly on the wing. We just need to see more of him offensively, but he showed he could take steps forward there, hitting 38% of his threes, albeit on minimal attempts. We'd like to see a little bit more than that. Free throws have been solid, hit his 2-pointers at a solid rate. I think you can't be anything but impressed with what O'Neal was able to produce, but where's the ceiling on him? You feel like he's getting pretty close to that already, and I don't think he's ever going to be a massively impactful guy. Tone Bradley in his second season played just 3 games, 12 minutes a game. I thought he took some steps forward, Tony Bradley, this season, but still he's a guy that I do worry about overall as a long-term prospect, plus 0.36 PIPM in the G League. We didn't get to see much of him here. At least we got a decent enough block rate out of Tony Bradley during his NBA time. But with Ekpe Udoh likely gone on this team, I think we could hope that Bradley can move into the third string center role next season. But I'm not holding my breath that he's going to be able to do it or do it at a passable enough level. We haven't really seen him be able to do that at any point so far in his NBA career. He's barely played in his NBA career. but at least we saw a bit of an improvement from Bradley, so I'm not completely writing him off. I'm also not putting a huge amount of faith in him. Kyle Korver, 38 years of age for Korver, 19 minutes, 8.6 points, 2 triples a game, traded early in the season from the Cavs. He's an excellent three-point streamer who at this point in his career offers absolutely nothing else per game at all. No steals, no assists, no rebounds. Field goal percentage has dropped off, but still hits his threes at a high rate. On-off was pretty strong, plus 2.6. PRPM, marginally negative, struggling a little bit more on defense at this point, but he's just that guy who you can stream in and get threes, and he's going to continue to do that for, you think, at least another 1 or 2 more seasons, but by then he'll be 40 years of age, so maybe it's only 1 more year. Tabo Cephalosha, also quite old, 35 years of age, does nothing much apart from being a steals streamer, 0.9 steals per game in 12 minutes, that's a really high steal rate. Shot 48%, but it's on limited attempts, can't hit free throws. He's a steals and threes sort of stream option when the minutes come his way, but at his age, I don't think we should be expecting huge minutes for him coming forward. It was a crowded Jazz roster, and he couldn't find consistent minutes all the time, and that did limit him. Really strong defensive PIPM, second on the team behind Gobert pretty comfortably. And so can still lock it down there. A plus 4.6 on-off just doesn't provide anything more really than steals. Hull Neto, a guy that the advanced numbers really did like here, plus 0.49 PIPM. His on-off at plus 10.3 was really, really stunning, really, to get to that level in 474 minutes. And we saw some flashes from him as a guy that can shoot a little bit, can get some assists. With Rubio gone, with Exum continually injured, Neto could push up into a larger role next season. But even if he was to somehow get 30 minutes a night, he'd be more of a 16-team league player than anything more exciting than that. That does bring us to Exum, whose season ended with a knee problem again. Still hasn't turned 24 years of age, but just can't put together any sort of consistent run. 7 points per game, 2.6 assists, 0.3 steals. I think we're getting to the stage where we have to cast doubt on Dante Exum ever having an impact in the NBA. He's still, he's shown he can be fast. He can have these moments where he plays unbelievable defense. He has these explosive scoring moments, but it just isn't consistent enough. He can't stay healthy. That's multiple knee injuries, shoulder injuries. The advanced stuff didn't love him this season, and his per-minute fantasy production just isn't there. And while he showed some flashes in that summer league 2 years ago, we thought, shit, maybe it's time for Exum to really, really step it up. He was overtaken by Donovan Mitchell in that role, playing the 2 and playing the 1. And I just have to think at this point we have to be considering any production we get from Exum and any sort of sniff of being a top 200 player as a real bonus, and far from being any sort of expectation. I just don't see that from Exum at this point in his career, unfortunately. Epe Udo, we're not going to talk too much about him. Naz Long, Tyler Kavanagh. Let's talk a little bit about George Niang, who I thought was really solid in his first season for the Jazz. 26 years of age, though. He is a little bit old. 59 games, 9 minutes. But he is a guy that if the minutes actually come his way on a tanking team in March, say next season, he can fill it up right across the board. But on this Utah team, they're just too stacked for him to be too much of an impactful guy. But he's always a name to watch. While Grayson Allen, I thought it was a really poor season from Grayson Allen. Negative 5.3 PIPM and negative in wins added. Tough to do. Negative 15.7 on-off. These are really poor numbers in his 416 minutes. Really struggled as that guy. 32% shooting, low assist rate, no defensive numbers. Could not get a rebound to save his life. I didn't massively love him coming in. I like him even less now, and any faith you would have in him even being a top 200 guy, I think you should feel pretty comfortable in eliminating that. And that'll do it for this Utah Jazz team. Don't forget, check out our sponsors, the Himalaya Podcast app, where you can subscribe to this show. Subscribe also Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Check out Grip 6 Belts, UnTuckit Shirts, and Hotels.com. Follow me on Twitter at @redrock_Beeble and the network at LockedOnNBANet, and on Instagram at the same. Check out our draft coverage, which is going to be coming in the next week or so, right here on this podcast and on Locked On NBA. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Donovan Mitchell.